Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cyber Therapy. My name is Ashleigh Lee. I am Senior Marketing Manager here at Jupiter One, and I'm so glad that you're here tuning in with us. We've had an awesome season 2 so far. And if you're new here, we usually chat with people who are in cybersecurity, are really interested in how people work and how people communicate and whatnot. And so we just get to peek into their minds a little bit and understand how they got to where they are today. We usually stream on the first and third Wednesdays of the month at this time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific. So whether you are eating lunch or grabbing a beverage for a happy hour, we are glad that you're here. So, like I was saying earlier this season, we've been talking about personality tests, building teams. How do you round out your knowledge as a budding cybersecurity practitioner and leader? And so, if you haven't tuned into those yet, definitely tune into those. We've talked about StrengthsFinders tests, personality tests, just how different pieces of the puzzle, aka your people, can operate together. So, yeah, we got a chance to also explore product security. And so we got to talk with Michael Roberts from Abbott's Diabetes Care and Radhika Rastogi from Capital One. And so both of them got to share their perspectives on how they got into product security and what does product security mean today, and how they interface with all the different teams and shore up maybe gaps of knowledge that they not necessarily had hands-on experience on, but they build a team to really shore up those weaknesses. So with that, I think today we've got a great topic going down that train of learning and training. And so I'd love to bring to the stage Scott Wright. He is the CEO of ClickArmor. He's got over a decade of security awareness building and is taking a lot of that experience into what they're building at ClickArmor, which is a fully gamified security awareness delivery platform. So welcome, Scott. Round of applause. Woo!
Thank you very much, Ashleigh. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So glad that you're here. Would love to kind of just give everybody a taste of how did you get into cybersecurity? Because I think a lot of people have just a lot of different backgrounds, whether they're technical or not. And so we'd love to just hear from you how you got into cybersecurity and why do you stick around?
That's a really good question. So my background is actually engineering, but about partway through my career, I actually switched to do more human-oriented things. So it's kind of an interesting story, I think. I actually was a software product manager at a security company where I learned a lot about the different, types of technologies that go together. We were a PKI company at Entrust, so lots of crypto stuff before crypto became a currency. But in those days, it was really interesting to learn about the different kinds of authentication and access controls and antivirus and all that stuff. And so when I left there around 2003, I became a consultant. And I learned a lot about security of large systems in big government projects. And that's kind of what I got into security deeper and deeper, doing all those things. But the turning point for me kind of came when I realized after 4 or 5 years that we have lots of great security technologies, and it's pretty plausible to put together good systems that are secure. But there's always something that's vulnerable, and that tends to be the people.
Very, very interesting perspective. And I would tend to agree with that because I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about security at the forefront. They just want to get to instant gratification, right? So before we dig into that a little bit further, government stuff. Is there any like cool stuff that you can talk about? Because I on last season we got to talk to Kirsty Payne, who is at Splunk, and she got to work for basically the NSA of the UK. So she had a lot of experience there, and so would love to just poke a little bit, maybe not specifics, but would love to just hear any like interesting stories that you got there from the field.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. Actually, I worked on a contract with a similar organization here in Canada that was really had a couple of different branches. One was to do the kinds of stuff that we associated with the NSA, but also to generally protect government networks. So to give guidance to other government departments on what they should be doing in their IT systems and security systems to make sure that the citizens' data is being protected. And so spent several years working on different systems there. And I don't know that there were any really exciting projects or stories to tell about that particular thing. Not that I can speak of anyway, but I didn't really. I mean, they're very, very protective, and I guess one of the notable things is that they do what's called system high security, which means everybody has to be cleared to the very highest level, just
Wow.
in case you come across something that is sensitive, or extremely sensitive, and so
Yep.
then that covers them. But it's not always that efficient because it's very costly to get everybody cleared to the top level.
Yep.
But they do that just so that they can protect the information properly.
Yeah, I think when my husband was working at Maxar, it took him 18 months to get cleared.
Yeah,
So definitely long, time
yeah.
intensive, a
It
lot of
takes
resources.
longer if you travel or you've moved a lot, right?
Hmm.
Because they have to
Hmm.
go to all those places, talk to people, and learn, whether you were a good person or not. Whereas if you've lived in the same place for 10 years, it's a lot easier for them to vet you.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, so you were working on systems and whatnot. So at what point did you go from, what was the turning point for you to go from technical, like the actual, putting together systems and whatnot, to
Yeah.
focusing on getting people more aware of best practices for security?
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because, as I said, there are a lot of good security technologies out there. And
Mhm.
as you work on large projects where government systems may be doing, income tax processing or statistics or things like that, they're very conscious of the security of citizens' data. And so we're trying to put the best possible systems together. And one of the things that I worked on was risk assessments. And so we would do essentially a risk assessment for people who kind of think, well, that's very nebulous. There's a kind of a simple model that I use, and that is you've got assets, you've got threats, and you have in between them vulnerabilities. So the assets are the information or the systems or the even physical assets that you have that are valuable. And if somebody got access to them, either confidentiality is breached or integrity is breached or availability is
Broken.
compromised,
Mhm.
then that's going to cost you money, and so you want to protect those things. That's what we're looking to protect. On the other hand, there's the threats, and for every one of those assets there is a threat, and you can imagine who might want to go after them, and
Mhm.
if you can imagine who's interested, you can imagine how they would get there. Would it be over the internet? Would it be through texting or phone calls or whatever? So there's always a path for those threats to get to the assets, and so we
Mhm.
would do lots of risk assessments on lots of different systems, looking at all the different ways threats can get to the assets. And in the end, you try and put safeguards in place to beef up the vulnerabilities so they're not so vulnerable.
Mhm.
But there were always the top risks tended to have human vulnerabilities associated with them, which meant things like people not handling their passwords properly,
Sharing
or
passwords.
sharing passwords or just accidentally exposing data, when they didn't realize that they should, or maybe not updating your systems when the system says it needs to be updated. So
Mhm.
all kinds of little actions that, the humans could do that would really put the systems at risk. And I got really interested in it because that was always the case. No matter how good the technology was, there were always these things about how people could use or misuse the systems and cause the risks to actually materialize. And so that after 5 or 6 years of this, I thought I'd actually rather be working more on solving that problem of the human vulnerability than
Mhm.
coming up with another way to secure the data, or outsmart the next virus or whatever. Just seemed
Mhm.
like an endless game, but there was a lot more return on investment, to actually, if you could really get people to change their behavior. And it turns
Right.
out that's a very hard thing to do. But one of the things that I started doing was lunch and learns. I would go and speak at my accountant's office. Had 10 people, and we'd talk about cybersecurity and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
people at the time, we weren't even calling it cybersecurity in 2009, 2010. It was just IT security or securing your data or your computers. But
Mhm.
in the end, I realized, I really needed something to make it more interesting to people, because it just either went over people's heads or they just didn't see it as being relevant to them. And so that's
Mhm.
kind of where I got challenged. I started reading a lot about what what kinds of attacks actually work that are worth talking about.
Mm.
And one of the things I discovered, I think it was like a dark reading article in 2008 or something, where a penetration tester had been hired by a bank
Mhm.
to break into their systems. And the client, as usual, was a little bit overconfident about how well their technology was secured.
Set up. Yeah.
Yep. And so this guy took, I don't know, 20 different USB drives and put some
Mhm.
malicious code on them and dropped them in the parking lot and all around the property of the organization. And
Mhm.
of the 20, I think, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like 12 or 15 of them got plugged in. And what with the actual malware that was on them wasn't malicious. All it did was it collected information about the system that it was being plugged into, so he could prove I had access to your systems because here's all the the data
Right.
or
The data that
something
I could
about the
access. Yeah.
accounts. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that sort of proved the point. And I thought that's a pretty cool kind of story if you could tell that and show people. But I thought maybe there's a way to do this, but I didn't want it to be very risky for the people who might pick things up. I can imagine, if you use real malware and somebody took the device and they didn't work at
Plugged it
that
in.
place, maybe they went
Right.
in next door to the hospital and plugged it in at a nursing
Yes.
station, and maybe somebody died at the moment you
Oh
plugged it in.
my gosh.
Just didn't really want that kind of
Yes.
complication,
Yeah,
right?
I see.
so I actually designed a much simpler method. It really just used HTML files that referenced images that were on a server I controlled. And so every time somebody plugged in a device and
Mhm.
opened up a file, I could tell which device and which file it was on just because of what it was requesting from the server. And so that just gave me some data. And all I really wanted to do was use that to tell people, you know what, this is a situation where I dropped a whole bunch of these devices in public places, and 60% of the time people would plug them in to look at
Mhm.
what was on them, not
Mhm.
realizing how risky it was to do that. And that was
Yes.
the start of what I called the honey stick project.
Wow, so cool. My husband and I have talked about this too because we're every now and again we will find like a USB kind of just sitting out there like at the airport or whatever. It's like a newish one, or like you get USB sticks from other companies like as a
Yeah.
swag gift, right?
At trade show.
And
Yeah.
you're like, yes, and like, oh, let's plug this in, see what's in there, wipe it, and then we can use it for our own purposes. Well, that's not necessary now for obviously the cloud, but like that's just plugging it in
Yeah.
is what gives them access, huh?
Exactly. And there are actually a more malicious versions of USBs. They look like a regular USB, but they're actually designed to attack your system rather than just having some malware on it that might auto run. And so there's something called a rubber ducky, which
Uh-huh.
is a strange name, but it's what's used by people to plug into a computer, and it literally acts like a keyboard and types in something in a hidden window. Really,
Mm-hmm.
it really just types in a malware script that tries to
Mm-hmm.
connect to a computer. So all these kinds of things are actually out there, and we're just trying to teach people about this stuff. And so when I was giving these sessions, lunch and learns, and things like that, I'd be talking about these as a bit of an icebreaker, and it was always really interesting to hear people's discussion, because they would say, well, if I found one, I would just open it up for a minute to see who owned it and try and get it back to them, right? Everybody kind of feels they're going to be doing the right thing by doing that. And
Right.
so it turns out, though, it's still risky for you to do that, even if you have good
Mm-hmm.
intentions.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the interesting things that happened when I was doing that project was, after a couple of years, I had been blogging about it, not doing a whole bunch at one time, but over time, I would just talk about ones that I dropped. And eventually, Symantec contacted me, the antivirus company, and they said, we have a new mobile security suite. Kind of like what you're doing. Is there a way we could do this with cell phones, like iPhones?
Mm-hmm.
Because iPhones were just coming out at the time, or just becoming popular. And
Right.
I said, yeah, we could probably do that. And so I designed a bunch of fake apps that would
Uh-huh.
show up on the home screen of a phone, and also track the phones using GPS.
Whoa.
And there were some people who said, well, you should monitor the microphone and the video camera as well. And I'm going, that's a little bit too
Too
creepy, right? So
invasive. Yeah, too
yeah.
invasive there.
But we did get some really interesting results. We dropped 50 of these phones. Now, I didn't buy them. Symantec
Mm-hmm.
bought
Yeah,
them, but
yeah.
so
Okay.
we dropped 50 phones all around North America in different cities, and
Mm-hmm.
the data was really interesting from that. And it became kind of a public interest, almost a psychological experiment, right? Because you
Uh-huh.
wonder what people are going to do with these things. And if you took a guess, how many do you think people would? What percentage of people do you think would have tried to return a phone if they just found it lying somewhere?
Well, if it was an iPhone when it was getting popular, I don't have strong faith in people. I feel like they would have kept it for themselves and tried to flash it and then own it.
Yeah. Well, so I don't have the exact data because we ended up using Androids
Oh, okay,
because
okay.
because it was easier for me to I mean I would have had to jailbreak all the iPhones to put
Right.
arbitrary code on them. But so we did it with Android phones, and 50% of the time people would contact the name that was in the contacts
Mhm.
app that said me or my contact information, right? And it
Right.
was a made up name, but 50% of the time people would
Give it back.
contact me to
Oh,
say, hey, I want to return it. We never actually took them because they were in all different cities, but we
right.
just monitored who would return them. And then the next question becomes, so if you imagine having 12 different apps on
Yep.
that phone, and it has things like HR plans, passwords, private pictures,
Yes, intellectual
salary
property.
data, yeah, all
Mhm.
this stuff. Like just each one had a different app, and it was labeled with stuff. And if you really knew the technology, you knew that that was unlikely to be what it was just based on the title. But you could make an app that had any title at all.
Mhm.
So we had these 12 different fake apps, and if you actually clicked on one, it would have a plausible error message like, oh, can't reach the network right now, try again, right? And so but we would measure how many times people would access these things and at what times. And
Mhm.
so if you
Wow,
had
then
a
you get to peek into like what people are curious about.
Exactly. So what do you
Wow.
what do you imagine would be the things that people went most for?
I think people probably would have wanted to know financial information. Um
Private
whether
pictures.
it's wow, really? That's
70
insane. Dirty
75%.
people.
75% of the people, it was the top app. And there's actually, the report is still available if you were to Google Symantec honey stick project for smartphones or something. So you could find all the data about what the histogram was of each app.
Mhm.
So it was really a fun project, and it basically showed that 85% of all the phones, somebody went in and looked at more than just the contact information to say, who can I
Right.
return this to?
Right.
And there were some fun stories around them too. Like one of them I lost or I lost. It was
Semantic.
Symantec people that sort of planted them, but one of them was on the Santa Monica Pier, and
Oh yeah.
it was picked up, and I could see the data because it was pinging every 10 minutes or whatever. And then
Yeah.
after about an hour or two, it had moved to a home somewhere, and then it just
Uh-huh.
disappeared. So they had taken the SIM card out, or they'd factory reset it or something, and so I wasn't getting the data anymore. But
Yeah.
about 5 days later, I got an email saying, I found your phone on the Santa Monica Pier, and now I feel guilty. I'd like to return it.
Wow. So do you think they tried to use the phone then?
Oh yeah, they were using it for a period of time, I'm sure.
Oh
But
man.
yeah, it was
That's
because it
hilarious.
had a prepaid. Each one had a prepaid plan with like $10 or something worth of data or voice on it. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they got to use it. Maybe they ran out of data and decided it was time
Yeah,
to
it's
return
no
it.
longer useful to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, how funny.
But yeah,
Okay,
that's the kind of stuff that I was doing back 10 years ago.
that's super cool because I think one of the segues now into security awareness, right? Like, what are the top three things that you think help people learn about security? Because I know you mentioned one of them earlier, which I think
Hmm.
is storytelling, right? Effective
Hmm.
storytelling has staying power in people's heads.
Yep.
And if you make it personal to them, they'll remember it more. Like, I didn't care about password management until I started looking at you've been owned, right?
Yes. Yes.
And once things started popping up there, I was like, well, I should probably start being better about my passwords. Not that I
Yep.
think people will come after me at this point because I don't think I'm not some big influencer, people. I promise
Yes.
you. But like, I work at cybersecurity companies now, right? So that probably have more interesting information. So yeah. Anyways, so what are the other things that would
Hmm.
be at the top of the list that you think contribute to people retaining security information better?
Interesting. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Storytelling is number one, really, because it actually puts people in a relevant space where they can relate to what's going on. The story I told you about the honey stick project, everybody could relate to. Well, what would happen? These things
Mhm.
are really good. Um, but is getting, I think, just the description that I told you earlier may not be that exciting, but we all have threats that are targeting us on an increasing level every day, every month. And so we are all going to have to get better at managing our risks, especially, we could talk about
Mhm.
chat GPT and stuff like that, right? But I mean, attackers are starting to use, better tools. It's going to be a cat and mouse game, but they're actually much more convincing. It's not just spotting the bad grammar in an email anymore. People really have to learn
Mhm.
more about risk and how to protect their own assets the way, in
Yep.
the sense that I was talking about before. And I think the last one would be engagement, because when you look at the kinds of training that has existed, and this is why I created a brand new platform, it was really hard to engage people with a plain old learning management system where you would pick a course, start the course, get some text, maybe an image of a person holding a laptop or pointing at a clear glass window with all these diagrams on it, right? Just generic
Yep.
stock
Stock
imagery.
images.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. It just doesn't engage people, and then you test them, with 5 questions about something that's maybe even true or false, right? It's very, very little proof that they
Low
have any
bar.
proficiency.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so you really have to do more. You have to do more
Mhm.
to engage people to keep their focus on what you want them to learn. And that's something that I really learned in about 2014, 2015. I had customers, I had my own online like learning management system as well that people used. And
Mhm.
I got good feedback from the customers, but I could tell people really weren't engaging. They weren't absorbing the information, and they only did it once a year because nobody would
Mhm.
forced them to do it more than once a year because it was so bad.
Yep.
And so I did a bunch of research because people had said, could we make this more engaging? Could we use games or gamification or something? And it wasn't that much of a trend at the time. So I did
Mhm.
some reading and discovered something really interesting based on my knowledge of how people had responded to training before, and the fact that there are studies that show how gamification of training actually helps. There
Mhm.
is, I would say, you have to have gamification in order for awareness to actually work, because people are looking for any excuse to disengage with the
Yep.
training because
Especially
it's
it's
not their
because it's
job.
mandatory.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
It's a
exactly. I
mandatory
mean,
thing.
but people have a lot of excuses. I've heard them all, right? It's not my job. It's too boring. It's too vague. It's too technical. I don't have time. All those things, right?
Mhm.
And so as
Mhm.
soon as you do something in the training that turns them off, then they're just going to try and get through it as fast as they can and not pay any attention to it if it is
Yep.
mandatory. If it's not mandatory, they just go do something else.
Yep. And just not do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially like for like video based stuff too. It's
Yeah.
very easy to just, unless it's like a really good script and a good story and it's well produced,
Yep.
most of the time it can be very cheesy. Like a lot of those
It,
like HR films and stuff, right? It's very cheesy
yeah.
and not super engaging. So people will usually
Yeah, and
just
if
like,
let's imagine you do invest a lot in making a really good quality video, right?
mhm.
And it does engage people, it has a good story, or maybe it's funny, and people will remember the story, but they don't always remember the message you were trying to get them to remember
Yes,
because
like
there's so
what
much
should you not
context
be
that has to
doing?
go around it, right?
Precisely.
So video, and the other thing with video is it's very expensive to change. Now, maybe that'll change with AI as you can do, real time video, but that's still got a long way to go.
Hmm.
And so when you think about, how quickly your threats change, or, different tips that you want to give to people, you've got to create a lot of content quickly. And video is not easy to do that with. And so what we actually provide is more of a sort of a hybrid. It's not just static text, and it's not video, but it is interactive, and it does
Hmm.
and keep you thinking, I have to figure this out before I click on this, or if I click on this, what will happen? Will something different happen than happened last time? And
Right.
you could even do things like choose your own adventure, where you give somebody a little bit of context about a story. It doesn't have to be, fully engrossing, but you give somebody the context, and then you ask them a question. It's not right or wrong. It's just, what would you do, right? And
Hmm.
somebody makes a choice, and you give them some feedback, And maybe they got enough information from that feedback to decide at the end of this process whether to trust somebody or not. And
Mhm.
so I call it choose your own adventure on rails because you can't go too far off the
Right.
track. And that's really important because to employers, if I want to put my people through security awareness training, I don't want them to be spending all day on it. And if it's a game, that could be actually very bad for perception to say, you know what, I don't want people playing games all day. I want them to be working.
Right.
So there's an efficiency aspect of the training that has to come through as well as the engagement and education.
So you lead me into the next question I was going to ask you, which was, how do you know how effective your training is?
Yeah,
Are there metrics that you track?
actually, we don't have yet, but it is something that I'm trying to talk to partners about to see
Hmm.
how we can correlate our results with the results that are happening in the real world, like a number of incidents actually caused by humans, right? So, or
Hmm. Hmm.
employees. But a lot of organizations don't track that data, right? So
Hmm.
you can have a security incident and event management system that has a whole lot of data about events generated by systems, but they're not actually tagging them to say, oh, this one was caused
By
because
this
somebody clicked on
user.
a link or by
Yes.
this user. Yes.
Hmm.
And so it's hard to correlate that at this point, but I actually
Hmm.
do want to do that. What we can do though is we do a baseline test in many of our foundational courses where we test you on what you know before you start taking the training. And we don't give you a lot of feedback. It's still kind of fun and interesting. You make a decision and then we go, okay, now here's the next one. So we do 5 or 6 or 10 of these things. And then at the end, you get to see your results from the baseline and say, oh, you got
Hmm.
4 out of 10 wrong or something like that. And you can go review and see which ones were right and why or why not. And
Hmm.
then the same test at the end. And when you do that, we can show that you're actually improving your ability to spot the clues
Hmm.
that you've taught, whether it's a safe sender or a link or just the body content and context of a message. And so once you can measure how well people are able to spot those clues, then you at least have an expectation that when they see that in the real world, they'll have actually seen something like it in the past
Yeah.
and made a choice about it. And we know
Mhm.
that they're better at doing that after they've taken the training than before.
Yeah, and you're also doing it in a safe environment. So, because I think one of the other things I had learned talking to, I think it was in my conversation with Tracy Bannon, when we were talking about training like DevOps teams.
Yes.
It's always easier to train in a like a healthy and closed, healthy, safe environment
Yeah.
on the right things to do. So that way, when you're under duress,
Yeah.
you're more likely to do the right thing.
Absolutely. I
So.
mean, that's a real issue. You'll see a lot of my posts on LinkedIn are about the pitfalls of live phishing simulations, and I'm not totally against them. They can be very useful, but there are so many variables that it becomes almost impossible to use. To have a control on them to say, I did it last time and I got a 5% click rate, and this time I got a 2% click rate. Well, does that mean we're getting better, or did we just have an easier test the second time, right?
Mhm.
And so those are all these variables that exist make it really hard to do testing in a live operational environment. On top
Mhm.
of that, there is the human aspect of it, right? Where if you really surprise somebody or shock somebody, say, you know what, you just won $100,000 or you got a grant or you're getting a bonus because we have a surplus of profits this year. Who has that? But it's actually
Woo!
happened. It's actually happened, right? So there are
Yes.
companies that have promised bonuses in live phishing simulations, and then when someone clicks the link, they're let down, and it's like, oh
Mhm.
man, you just deceived me. I don't trust the IT team
Yes.
anymore. Any email I get that looks like that, I'm just going to forward. I'm not even going to open, and that starts to hurt productivity, right? Because
Mhm.
people are not going to be addressing things that are real.
Yeah. The what I was just gonna say, it escaped my brain.
I could go
I'll
on
pivot to
about
a different.
phishing.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I'll pivot to a different question though, because I
sure, yeah,
think the one of because my brain went in two different directions. So on the one hand, right, um, there is a way to more or less track people's retention of information,
hmm
right? For people who want to be doing security awareness training and
hmm
like providing that, do
Yep.
people need to be technical in that kind of role in order to manage a security awareness program?
You know
Or
what?
how do people typically go into that line of work?
This might be controversial, but I'd say it's better if you're not technical. Yeah, and actually,
Why is that?
be, because the technical people tend to not realize what people don't know, and that makes it hard for them to communicate the actual guidance in a relevant way. Again, goes
Mm-hmm.
back to relevance. If you ever read the book Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath,
Yes.
do
Mm-hmm.
you remember the story about trying to recognize a nursery rhyme, from a nursery rhyme song like Mary Had a Little Lamb or something, without hearing the tune, only hearing somebody
The
clap the
words.
beats? No,
Oh, oh.
just clap the beats, right? It,
Uh-huh.
and if you have somebody think of a nursery rhyme song, clap the beats, and then you try to guess which one it was, you can't do it because
Mm-hmm.
you haven't got the context. But
Right.
the person doing it says, like, that's so easy. How did you miss that? Right. I mean, that's the way it is with IT people who
Mm-hmm.
are trying to teach people or assess security awareness, because
Mm-hmm.
they assume everybody knows a lot more than they really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really insightful because I think over the last 8, 10 years, right, there's I've definitely seen a rise in positions that don't require as much technical expertise in security
Hmm.
because the the industry has been so technical for so long, right? We're
Yeah.
at a crossing roads now where we need to build the bridge, connect the dots for people who are not in this area of expertise. And
Yeah.
so that leans more into the storytelling, communication, being able
Yes.
to communicate more simply on why things are important.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why non-technical people can be very good at cybersecurity in a lot of different roles. Number one, I think, is that the technology itself doesn't need to be known by a lot of people, right? I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
people developing it need to know it, and the people operating it need to know it, but most people don't really know that much about the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas every day now we're having interactions with people whom we trust, right, or are
Mm-hmm.
supposed to trust,
Mm-hmm.
and teaching people and assessing people and providing policies and processes that could help people will be as important as knowing the technology.
Yeah. Okay. Um, what do you think has contributed? Because security awareness has, along with like the more focus on like soccer skills, communication skills, and whatnot in cybersecurity, that all of that has been come into light more recently. So, what do you think has contributed to this rise in security awareness? Like just people talking about it, and different thinking through different ways to help people learn and be more aware of their security practices.
I think mostly because it hasn't really been working very well, and the threats are getting worse, right? I mean, if
Yes.
you look at the curve of growth of threats, it's just going up exponentially. Whereas people's ability to spot threats is not growing that quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
so we really do need to provide better quality awareness training to people, and there's more to it than just the content or even the platform that you're delivering it on. Actually, I
Mm-hmm.
just held and this could be available for a recording that people might want to go to. Just an hour ago, I finished a live cybersecurity awareness forum session. This is something I do every other week with security professionals who just have an interest in security awareness. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Thank you
Yep.
very much.
And yeah, no
Um,
problem.
so this is something we've been doing. That was number 16 we did today, and it was on the topic of maximizing your security awareness team's success through organizational structure and delegation. So nothing to do with the content, nothing to do with the
Mm-hmm.
platform. It's all about the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a team of security awareness people who are mandated to do the training and do the assessments and things like that, and they are buried in the IT organization, they're very insulated from the rest of the organization in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And they are also isolated from the executives.
Mm-hmm.
And the executives are the ones who really understand the risks or the business risks. And the IT security awareness team should be talking to them more, and they should be talking to other leaders in the organization. And so it's really hard to do that if you're as I said, buried in the IT organization. Unless you have a really strong extroverted personality as a manager, and you don't mind, asking for, a meeting with executives. This is one thing that I've done security consulting with organizations where they wanted to redo or restart their security awareness training program. They had all new people,
Mm-hmm.
and they brought me in, and the first thing I said is, well, we're going to interview all the executives. And they said, what? We don't want to do that. Well, we
Yeah.
kind of have to do that. Okay. And so then I talked to their manager, and they said, yeah, we could do that. And so we sent out, invitations to everybody, all the major executives,
Mm-hmm.
and had one-to-one discussions with them, asked them
Mm-hmm.
about their vision, what the barriers are they see in the organization, and any other tips that they would have for us to make a better, more successful program. And it
Mm-hmm.
was just a wealth of information. And the people in the team just couldn't believe how much cooperation they got from the executives. But you have to be able to go and ask. And
Yeah.
so that's going to be a huge part of how we improve the whole part of security awareness. I mean, we talk about people, process, and technology. The technology, kind of like I learned 15 years ago, lots of great technology,
Yep.
not so much a problem there. The policies and procedures, yeah, we should work on those. But the people are what
Yes.
the attackers are targeting most.
Yeah, I think you bring up such an interesting and complex challenge is, as people are going through their careers, right, being able to step out and reach out to executives, especially in big corporations, right? Like
Mhm.
that can be pretty intimidating,
Yeah.
because the executives can be pretty removed, right, from the us peons here
And they
who
may
are
not be all
doing
that
the things,
receptive
right?
too. So yeah.
Yes. So, super interesting. How did you? Well, I guess you had an in because you're starting the whole program over again. So that was like your
Mhm.
critical uh, D-Day kind of activity where you had the opportunity to actually
Yeah.
step out and do that.
Yeah.
How would you recommend to other people who maybe don't have that, hey, we're starting fresh
Yep.
moment? How would you recommend to those people who do want to get better insight from their executives on how security awareness plays into everything? How would
Right.
you bridge that conversation?
Yeah. So first of all, I would double check to make sure that it's not possible to restart, because you might still have that opportunity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that is something that you might come up in a board meeting or something, that you don't, if you're not close to the C-suite or the board, then you don't know about that stuff.
Right.
But if you keep your ears and eyes open and ask your management about, is there an opportunity to revamp our awareness program, I'd say go for that. But aside, and let's say you don't have that opportunity, first thing to do is have everybody on the team learn about risks and learn how to do personality tests and communication, how to how to communicate with the rest of the organization,
Mm-hmm.
because as we just sort of touched on, sometimes the IT team is kind of where the security awareness team came from,
Right.
and they have to learn how to deal with people that don't have the same personalities as them.
Mm-hmm. Whew, then that's always a big learning curve. So I will say,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's not easy. I didn't say it was going to be easy. I mean,
Yes, it is
actually, if
this.
people come to the forums that we have, there's a lot of good tips that the panelists and other attendees share, which is great value for people. And you can always learn things there that you could improve, your awareness programming.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I think I have time for one more question and then we will get into the game.
Oh, a game. Good.
Yes. And so, my last question for you is how have your years in security awareness training, just basically your whole history, how has that informed your leadership style now at ClickArmor?
Oh, that's really interesting. I always thought I'd be a good leader, but I never really had the chance. And I've worked in organizations where I was the head of an organization that just had myself in it. Product as a product
Team of
manager,
one.
yeah, you're a product manager in charge of a product, but
Mm-hmm.
the only people you can actually influence are the support people, the developer people, the contracts
Mm-hmm.
people,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was something I was never really exercised on. I actually took my management or master's in business admin
Mm-hmm.
early on in my career, not right out of undergrad. I did a couple of years of work, but I did take an MBA,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't say that it was instrumental in everything I'm doing right now, but it was valuable. It's great to get a good background on how business works, and that
Mhm.
does, I think, in some way help. But when it comes to my career and how things have changed over time, and now looking at myself as a CEO running an organization of people, I make a lot of mistakes. But it's good to have people that as you hear some management gurus say, have people that are smarter than you working for you.
Mhm.
That's a great idea. It's not always easy to
Mhm.
make sure, but I'm really lucky that I now have people that are smarter than me working for me,
Mhm.
and it's taken a long time to be able to trust people. I was either, I will trust you implicitly, and you better do it right, or
Uh-huh.
else I don't trust you and I'm going to do it because it'll be, in the end, it'll be quicker and easier if I do it. Right. So
Right.
it's that sort of, I couldn't go halfway.
Right.
But now I think I'm much better at trusting people, that I delegate to,
Mhm.
and just check in with them. I'm just sort of optimizing that leadership style, I guess is the way you'd put it.
Yeah, because I think there's definitely some parallels, right, between training and like coaching people,
Hmm.
right? And that translates into leadership and how you delegate and whatnot. So awesome. Thank you for entertaining that question. I appreciate it
Yeah.
for you. So thank you again.
Excellent.
Everybody give Scott a round of applause and don't go
Thank you,
anywhere in the
Ashley.
back
It's
in the
a
green room.
privilege to
With
be here.
yes. Don't go anywhere. I will say bye to you afterwards. So, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this wonderful episode with Scott Wright from Click Armor. Fantastic, just learning about security awareness training. If that is up your alley that you want to get into, by all means, it sounds like you don't have to be super technical in order to pursue that. So, pursue your dreams, get to know yourself. The more you are know yourself, the better that you can interact with other people and show up your fullest self at work. So, with that, thank you everyone, and we will see you next time on April 19th. We are going to have Maretta Orta from MITRE Engage. She's going to be sharing with us some stuff that she's been working on deception and social engineering and how to train people to engage more with those attackers. So, anyways, with that, last piece of announcement here is we will be at RSA at the end of the month. Our booth is in the South Hall. Um, we are booth number 1933. So if you are heading to San Francisco and you want to hang out with us, get some of our cool swag, we've got some books. It's blurred out there, but we'll have our books there. We'll have our pins. We'll have um, I hear Pickles, our alien, is going to make an appearance. So definitely stop by, say hello at RSA. That is the end of the month. South Hall, 1933. We will see you there. And until next time.